Hey guys, Parfax here, and today we are ranking the weapons for PvP for the July patch. Alright, let's get started. So before we get started, I want to have a couple caveats, and this is based on the PTR, the patch notes, and what I've tested. So we are going to do this based on OPR, and we're not going to do who is going to push the scoreboard the highest. We're going to be doing effectiveness, because let's be honest, if we're going to be talking about scoreboards, we're going to be talking about fire, ice, bow, healer, right? But we don't really want to do that. We want to talk about what weapons are going to be good for OPR, what weapons you're going to be effective with, and this is going to translate over to a lot of other things as well, but we're going to be focusing mainly on the OPR aspect. Now, before we start diving into each individual one, just note that almost every weapon here gets a buff. Because of the new perk pools, almost every weapon across the board is going to get a few buffs. We're going to talk about a few weapons that got nerfed on the patch, but we'll get into those when we get there. First, let's talk about Fire Staff. So the Fire Staff, in my opinion, got one of the biggest buffs. They buffed their skills pretty immensely. They're now going to be able to put Empowering Fireball on your Fire Staff, and it's going to be able to hit like a Mack truck. I'm going to do probably a funny little one-shot. I think I can get Fireball up there to one-shot some people. So we're definitely going to put this in the S category. I know it's a little bit weird because it's kind of a, only damage weapon, but this weapon got a lot of nice updates. And with some downticks of some other weapons, this weapon really is going to hit hard, and it's going to be really good next patch. Life Staff, we're not going to talk about it very much. We're putting it up in the S tier. I mean, it's always S tier. It got a buff, just like every other weapon, because you can now put maybe Fortified Sacred Ground on your Life Staff, and it's going to be crazy powerful. It's really good, and there's not much more we need to talk about with the Life Staff. Ice Gauntlet. It's still really good. We're putting everything in the S tier, aren't we? We're gonna put it in the S tier, and mainly because it's gonna be paired with the Fire Staff. You can also pair it with the Great Axe, and it'll be good. The Life Staff, and it'll be good. Ice Gauntlet is just a great CC weapon. It doesn't get as much of a buff as other weapons, but it gets still a nice buff from the extra perks on there. That it's still gonna stay in the S tier. There's not a whole lot that's gonna go over it. Now, we're going to start getting to some of the weapons that got nerfed. In the first, we're going to talk about Sword and Shield. Now, we have the Sword and Shield here, and if you didn't know, they nerfed it a couple ways on the PTR. Well, the main way they nerfed it is the Leaping Strike now doesn't stagger. Having said that, the Sword still has the best tracking of any melee weapon in the game. It actually still has somewhat of a benefit because you can stack so many perks on your weapon. And the one thing that people haven't talked about is you'll be able to stack 2 different weapon perks on your weapons to get a benefit from them. You can put one on your sword and you can put one on your shield. For instance, we can put Empowering Leaping Strike on our sword, and we can put Fortified Shield Rush on our shield to be super tanky and do a lot of damage. So I'm gonna put the sword. This is probably gonna be a controversial one because people are gonna say this is D tier. For sure people are gonna go, this is D. We're gonna put it in the B category. I think it's gonna be really good. I think it got a really big nerf, but I still think it's gonna be great. I definitely think this could move up to the A tier. We're gonna put it in the B tier to be sure. Now let's talk about the bow. The bow received, it was at least 4 nerfs, and if you didn't know, they nerfed the poison shot damage, which I don't mind at all. They nerfed the pen shot damage, which that's the biggest nerf. They did take 5% off of 2 different abilities that the bow can basically proc on cooldown. So you're going to get a 10% reduction in damage, which I think is a lot bigger than the other 2. I know people would argue that the pen shot nerf is probably the biggest, but I don't think so. I think it's the actual 10% damage mixed with the other ones, which makes it pretty bad. But having said that, the bow actually got a lot of nice buffs. So it got a massive buff to Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot, not only did the weapon perk get a buff to where it penetrates on every attack instead of just the last one, it got a buff that you can now cancel it. So a lot of the times you're just going to be like double Rapid Shot into a dodge. You can actually do this when somebody's sort of close to you, or you're trying to fight a 1v1 situation when they're not super far away. Rapid shot's actually gonna be something pretty good that you can hit a couple shots real quickly on, get a nice little burst of damage, then roll out of the animation so you don't do the third attack. It's actually a really nice buff. And they swapped one of their skills, Splinter Shot, which was basically a PvE ability or a janky PvP ability, to Explosive Shot. Now, I will say the Explosive Shot still has the old hitbox on the PTR. I imagine that'll change by the time it goes live, but they sped up the animation for it as well, and it feels really nice. It looks a little wonky when you cast it because it's got kind of like a weird walking animation, but you can walk while casting it. You don't really lose a whole lot of speed while casting it, and it casts really fast. This ability actually is going to slap. It's going to be really good. It puts a burn on the target if you hit a single target. It puts down an AoE explosion. I think it's going to go into a lot of builds, and its perk is really good because it can increase the damage of your next attack. So you can do something like Explosive Arrow Pen Shot and have your pen shot just deal a crazy amount more damage. So we're actually going to put this in the A tier. I know people are thinking this is D tier, and I honestly think that you can easily put this in the A tier. Or the S tier. The only reason why I don't have it in the S tier is because it did receive 4 nerfs. It received 2 5% damage nerfs, it received the pen shot nerf, and it received the poison shot nerf. One thing that I do love about the bow next patch is there's so many weapon abilities you can use. You know, I'm a big component of Rain of Arrows, but Rain of Arrows is probably the worst ability on the bow now. And I was someone that loved to use the bow, and now I don't even I'm not even gonna run that ability anymore. It's too hard to hit, and it's kind of just really clunky. But the bow got some nice upgrades in its perks. It still has a few perks that are absolutely trash, but it got some nice buffs along with some nerfs. So we're gonna put in the A tier. You're still gonna see bows, but it's not gonna be that bad. Next, we have the Musket. So the Musket's a weird one. It didn't receive any direct buffs or nerfs, but it did get a very big bonus from the new perk system. So if you're going to run the normal infamy, then we're going to put this in the C category. It's kind of just a annoying weapon. You know, you can put it in the B category if you really want, but it's kind of an okay weapon. But with some of the weapon perks, you're going to be able to get a massive, I forget the exact percentage on empowering shooter stance, but you're going to want to put shooter stance on your weapon because it's going to give you such a massive empower bonus that it's going to be really crazy. So we're actually going to put it up here in the B category. I think this definitely could go up into the A category and make people really salty when playing it, because it is going to be absolutely annoying if you can get the right musket made. And next patch, it's going to be a lot easier. It's still going to be hard to beat the infamy, but if you can get maybe a shooter's empowering stance with a enchanted vorpal, that weapon is going to absolutely smack. Next, we have the Blunderbuss, and the Blunderbuss is a weird weapon because I've seen people utilize it to at least the A category, and then I've seen people utilize it to this complete D category. It did get a couple little buffs because of the perk change, but honestly, it didn't get a change much at all. We're going to put it in the C category. This is a generalization, but if you're really good with this weapon, it definitely can move all the way up to the A, but most of the people that I've seen on the servers that I've been playing on, they don't use it very often, and when they do, it's not that great. But if you can get really good with this weapon, it is definitely up here in the A category. You can kind of still do that kind of assassin type playstyle with it, and can still be very good. Next, we're going to have the Warhammer, and the Warhammer we're going to put in the B category. Or should we put A? We'll put it in the B category, and here's why. I think it is still an S tier war weapon. I think it is still has some of the best synergies in the game when paired with a great axe, but in OPR, melee, depending on your team comp, can be a little rough. If you have a lot of ranged users, which you're going to see a lot of mages next patch, and you're still going to see a lot of bows next patch, that it can be very lackluster at times. So because it can be basically down here like in the C category or up here in like the A or S category, we're going to put it in the B. It didn't receive any direct buffs other than its weapon perks. It'll be really nice maybe if you're doing a utility to put Sundering Shockwave on your Warhammer. It could be really good. I'm gonna do a funny build with repulsing clear out on the Warhammer, but we're gonna put it in the B category just because in OPR, it can be very ineffective if you just don't have enough bruisers with you. But don't get it twisted. If you have a lot of bruisers and a lot of healers, this is definitely an S category weapon. Next is the Hatchet, and it's essentially the assassin weapon in New World. Right now, it does the most damage. You might want to say Spear, but I think Hatchet is just in such a great position. And honestly, we're going to put it up here in the S category. Now, I know a lot of people are going to really hate this because they're going to go, well, you're nerfing Tiger's Instinct, you're nerfing the Sword and Shield, we can't even use Hatchet. Hatchet is still a god tier weapon. It got such a good buff with the auto attack change. So if you didn't know, the second and third auto attack, I keep saying auto attacks, but basic attacks on the Hatchet are going to have tracking like the first one. The first one has a nice little lunge and has some pretty good tracking. They buffed some of its perks. Some of the perks and the weapons are really good. This weapon is still absolutely crazy. I definitely think it's an S tier weapon. I know you guys are going to run to the comment section and absolutely kill me because you're like, how can we run it without Sword and Shield? I still think you're going to run it with Sword and Shield. I've been running it without doing the one-shot combo, and it is just fine. You're going to play it more of a slightly more bruiser-ish play style, but even then you can go 100 con and be just fine with the Hatchet just because it has Berserk, because it has Defy Death, and it got a bunch of buffs on the range side. So a lot of us still use one ability on the range side as well. I like to use Rending Throw. That's probably what most people use. But you're going to be able to use Rending Throw. You can use Social Distancing if you want to use with the, a combination with the bow. We can also run it with, the Infected Throw now, which got a really sped up animation, does a lot of damage, has disease, and even the proc on it now got a nice little buff to where if the target dies, you get a big chunk of health. So it's going to be pretty good. I think this is the best assassin melee weapon in the game, and I don't think it changes. You're just going to go from running Tiger's Instinct, which I don't care what anybody says in the forums, was the most busted weapon we have in New World. It is by far the most damage. It's exactly, if you could craft a weapon that was BIS, maybe the only thing you can change, and by BIS, I mean a weapon that you can't even craft that's really good. Maybe you would put Chain on there instead of Keenly Jagged, but other than that, those are the two perks, Vicious Rogue, which were incredibly busted put together. They had to nerf it. I don't think they should have put Refreshing Evasion on there, but that's just kind of me. But this weapon is absolutely crazy, and don't get it twisted, this weapon is still going to be absolutely nuts next patch. Maybe you have to pair it with something like, I don't know, maybe the Ice Gauntlet? No, but I think Sword and Shield will be just fine. Next, we have Great Axe. We're going to put Great Axe up here in the A category. It didn't really get much of a change at all. It got a couple little buffs in the perk category if you put it on your weapon. But honestly, it's just an A category. It could be definitely S category if it was something like, the Bruiser meta came back. But in OPR, it's a lot of ranged most of the time. So it's kind of in the Warhammer. But you don't have to just run Warhammer with the Great Axe. You can run something like the Ice Gauntlet. You can run Blunderbuss. You can run Hatchet. You can run a lot of different weapons. You can run Spear if you really want to. You can run Void Gauntlet. But the Great Axe, enough said. Everybody knows Great Axe is still really good. And yeah, let's move on to the Rapier. Rapier, it's going straight to the S category. This is probably the most S category weapons that I've ever put in there. And honestly, the weapons are really close. Like, we may be looking at tiers and we have tier. But honestly, a lot of these weapons are really close. I think the balance is going to be really good next patch. But with the Rapier, you're going to have to craft a new one. Because, let's be honest, you're going to want Sundering Riposte on your Rapier. That's honestly the only ability that even matters on the Rapier for most uses. Like, everybody talks about Refreshing Move and stuff like that, but you don't auto-attack or basic attack that much on the Rapier. I'm going to be slapping on, I'm going to get an int one maybe and a dex one. We're just going to craft some Sundering Riposte on there, and it's going to be absolutely cracked out. Rapier, still god tier weapon if you're just looking to get away. Damage-wise, it does mean, not a whole lot of damage. The only way it can do some decent damage is you have to engage with it, and you have to get the Sundering Riposte off with the fully charged auto, and of course the evade, light attack, flash through. Next, let's talk about the Spear. We put it up here in the A category. Sorry, my dog started barking, so we cut out a little bit there. But the Spear, is going to be up here in the A category because it's just a great weapon. It got some really nice buffs from the perk category. You can do things like, you can do some crazy stuff like, especially in PvE, you can keep weakened up on the target. Was it 46% just 100% of the time? You have Cyclone, which got a nice little buff to where it doesn't push people away. You have the Bleed getting buffed. It had a lot of nice little buffs. You're going to probably be playing around maybe a little bit with the new weapons and or new perks. And it's just honestly a really good weapon. I think you can become an S tier player with the spear, especially if you pair it with something like the sword and shield. I know people are going to say, well, the stagger, but you just really need to get close to the target. The spear does a lot. I don't see spear, sword, and shield that much, which I think it's really good. I think those people have just went to the hatchet. But I think spear is definitely going to be an A category weapon because no matter what's going on, you can still just go around, assassinate the back targets. You can play kind of around the edge. It needs to be really effective assassinating single targets. Next, we have Void Gauntlet, and we're going to put Void Gauntlet up here in the A category, arguably S category. Honestly, everybody knows the Void Gauntlet. It's really good. Void Blade got a nerf by its basic attack damage, but again, it really benefits from some of the weapon perks. It had an interesting change to the Oblivion. We'll have to see how that does. It maybe have the ability to keep it up a little bit more, but you do lose some of its utility. But honestly, it's just a great weapon. You have Putrefying Scream, which can be really crazy if you have it on your Void Gauntlet. You can use it as a supporty weapon. You can use it as a main damaging weapon. It has a lot of utility. Overall, it's just a great weapon. Of course, Void Ice is really good if you're doing like a group scenario. If you're doing the typical, you know, Orb of Decay, Putrefying Scream, Oblivion type of play style. Or you can go the more offensive style, which is the Void Blade, Oblivion, Putrefying Scream. But again, melee can be very hit or miss in OPR, but when it comes to melee, Void Gauntlet is kind of, especially when you pair Void Ice, it's a play style that you don't have to go melee. You can go melee when you want and still be very effective when not at melee. So definitely an A tier weapon, definitely could consider it to be S tier. So what I take from this list is, honestly, these weapons are all fairly balanced. Now, there's going to be some that outshine others, and there's going to be some weapons that people feel like that aren't just quite there. Mainly the Blunderbuss. Like I said, I've seen some crazy people with the Blunderbuss, so just because it's down to C category, and that's mainly from what I've seen of people just not really playing it to its full potential, it definitely can move up the list. I think the weapons are going to be very close to pretty even. The only weapons that I see could be a problem mainly are, I mean, of course, Rapier if you just want to get away, but the big damaging ones, I think Hatchet and Fire Staff are going to be maybe some big nuisances next patch. Like I said, it is one little caveat is the Sleeping Strike did get nerfed with the Hatchet, so it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for some of the players that only thing they could do or only thing they knew how to do was do the one-shot combo with the Hatchet. And you're going to have to play it more of a, instead of just 100% assassin, you're going to have to play it more like a brawler. But let's be honest, it puts out so much cracked out damage that brawler is just not really what you want to call it. It's really an assassin. It's the best assassin weapon in the game. It got some buffs. It got some love. Even though we nerfed Tiger's Instinct, I think that is a good thing. Tiger's Instinct was absolutely crazy, and they do not need to revert the buffs like the forums may say. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree, disagree, anything. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, like always, and I'll see you next time. Peace.